this debate, and we're grateful to him. It's 2 hours. It runs from 6:30 to 8:30, and at 8:30 we'll be chatting to some audience members to get their reaction on this evening's debate. So first of all, this evening, from the Scottish Conservatives, we have Mark, who has been waiting kindly for us. Mark, a very good evening.
Good evening, nice to meet you.
How are you feeling about the debate this evening?
I'm very excited for it. I feel that campus, and especially encouraging politics on campus, is extremely important, and just giving a platform for all the political parties to make up their and decide which party is more inclined to their views.
So what exactly are you guys doing here this evening? What's your role here at the debate?
Dundee University Conservative and Unionist Association. So basically the Scottish Conservatives student wing of the party. We represent Conservative Futures Scotland, so that is also the student wing nationally in Scotland of the party. We just represent students and also are there for students to come and participate in politics in a conservative setting, so just discuss politics, policy, and get to meet people from the party.
And you guys are down in the foyer this evening?
Yes, we're down in the foyer, and you'll see a nice big blue banner, Scottish Conservatives, and you can get some freebies such as pens, USB sticks, and calculators.
Everyone loves a good freebie. I'm going to pick your brain. So it's only to the best of your knowledge, but there are a few topics that are going to come up this evening, asked by audience members. We'll start with mental health. Topic here on campus at the moment. There are lots of things going on to raise awareness.
We feel it's an extremely strong issue to tackle because there are unfortunately some disparities within mental health as a whole, as we have seen, and it's a big issue on campus. We feel it's extremely important to tackle that head on and just to ensure that people, totally discrimination free, people just tackle mental health and just create awareness, create people at the forefront of their mind and something just to solve within society and try and combat to the best of our abilities.
And another topic that's due to come up this evening is employment opportunities. Obviously, the waterfront is undergoing regeneration, thousands of job opportunities there, of course. Like many university cities, however, Dundee struggles in terms of keeping their students once they've graduated. So in terms of employment opportunities within Scotland, what are the Scottish Conservatives doing to ensure that students stay within Scotland to work as well as study?
Well, I think as we can see nationally, just not within Scotland but within the whole of the United Kingdom, that jobs are actually increasing. Full-time paid work is on the up, is increasing. Unemployment is extremely low, lowest in since records began, or at least for a significant amount of years. We are providing lots of apprentices jobs for people, and Nicola Sturgeon has recently cut the budget for college places in Scotland, and Ruth Davidson is a strong voice to keep those places and, if not to increase them, for people throughout Scotland so that they can be given the education that they most deserve, and to also just increase prospects and quality for people within Scotland. I feel that people in Scotland, especially younger people, may be disenchanted with education purely because they're not getting the funding, they're not getting the support, and they're not getting the quality of service that they most need and most want and they should deserve. But the Scottish Conservatives are standing up for college places, apprentices, and ensuring that unemployment decreases year on year.
Ruth Davidson isn't attending the debate this evening. We have Alex Johnson instead. Do you think that'll tarnish the image of the Conservative Party, the fact that the leaders from the other parties are here and Ruth Davidson is absent this evening?
Well, the key word in this debate was the leaders were invited. I mean, do take into account, were actually available. Ruth is a fantastic leader and fantastic debater. She would happily come along to these events, and we know she would. However, unfortunately, DUSA, through no fault of their own, picked a date which unfortunately Ruth could not make. But instead, Alex Johnson, our local MSP for this constituency, is coming along and is going to be a stronger voice for the party, and just as strong a voice as Ruth would be in this debate.
We'll be talking to the SNP representative in a few moments' time. But this is the referendum on first of all, if you don't mind me asking, how did you vote?
I voted no for independence, for a strong United Kingdom with an increasing Scottish participation within that union, and yep, the Scottish Conservatives fully believe that we should remain within the union. Yep.
And at the general election, the final question I'm going to ask you, the Scottish Conservatives did not perform too well here. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that the Scottish Conservatives were not the voice that the people wanted?
Well, I think it's harsh to say that the Scottish Conservatives were not, they didn't do it too well within the debate. Sorry, not the debate, the election. We increased our vote, and it was exactly the same as all the other parties. We did perform. We didn't perform as well as we'd hoped. However, we're always increasing activism and ensuring that our voice can be heard as a strong voice within Scotland and the United Kingdom. The Scottish Conservatives are the home for no voters, for members who wish to be a part of the United Kingdom. That way, and we're always going to get stronger, especially with this leader.
It's undeniable, though, that Nicola Sturgeon did very well indeed, especially amongst young voters. Nicola Sturgeon is seen as almost a breath of fresh air. She's seen as a very good, viable option. Why do you think that the Scottish Conservatives might not appeal to young people as much as the SNP do?
I would disagree with that. I feel like Ruth Davidson, being leader of the Scottish Conservatives, she extremely appeals to young people. She's part of the LGBT community. She is a young leader herself. She's born and bred within Scotland, and she is just a fantastic leader. She does appeal to young people, not so much as Nicola Sturgeon is a breath of fresh air. I would also argue that Ruth Davidson is a breath of fresh air. She's a good image for the party and does appeal to younger people.
We're going to have to leave it there. Mark, thank you very much for talking to us this evening, and enjoy the debate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Mark representing the Scottish Conservatives. We're going to speak now to the SNP representative. What's your name, sir?
Hi there, I'm Maggie.
Maggie, nice to meet you. What are you guys doing here this evening, the SNP?
We're here to sort of spread a little bit of information about the SNP and show a little bit of support on the ground. We're one of the most active political societies on campus currently, and our membership's forever growing, so we're just trying to reach out to as many students as possible, especially students who are just sort of freshly coming into it and get to take an opportunity at refreshers and getting into politics for the first time. So just making sure that they're here and they can get involved.
Let's talk about some of the topics. We were just talking to Mark about the topic of mental health. That's due to come up in the debate this evening. What are the SNP's policies on mental health issues, given that it's a very big issue here and that especially DUSA trying to raise a lot of awareness for? What are the SNP doing to raise awareness of mental health issues?
Well, recently I'm aware that Nicola Sturgeon has actually set aside more funds towards mental health care, which is extremely important because as someone who's actually suffered from mental health issues in the past, I can relate to these, and I do know that these kind of facilities are deeply underfunded in Scotland. Although DUSA has got amazing facilities here, the counselling service is absolutely amazing, but we do need more funding, and this is a good step in the right direction. Naturally, the SNP, we uphold the values of the National Health Service and healthcare available to all, whether that be physical or mental in any way. So more funding is needed, but what Nicola Sturgeon is currently doing is a good step in the right direction.
We were also talking to Mark about employment opportunities here. We were saying how Dundee graduates, like many students in student university cities, often tend to move away from the city that they studied in. What does the SNP do to ensure remain in Dundee to work as well as study?
Well, recently the living wage is coming into implement all across Scotland, and Dundee is no exception to that. So better paying jobs means more money into the local community and more money then being spent by employees into local community. So it's a good cycle overall. As well as that, there's been increase in budget towards the V&A, which is going to bring amazing job opportunities, especially for those studying in Dundee, because Dundee's got one of the biggest and richest art cultures across Scotland, and that's continuing to grow. And I think that extra funding, which was given by the SNP government, is going to help Dundee tremendously because it will boost money for the waterfront as well. And when I first came to Dundee a few years ago, it didn't look quite impressive, but you can see it growing more and more, and more people are staying. I'm an art student myself, and I know more and more of people who will graduate with me will stay in Dundee. I'm looking to stay in Dundee after I graduate in animation because the industries here are booming and they will continue to boom.
The SNP's performance at the general election you must have been happy with. You made massive gains.
We did make massive gains.
What do you think the appeal of the SNP was?
The appeal of the SNP was we were radically different from what Scotland had typically had in the past. People were excited for New Labour when it came out in the late 90s, but that soon soured when people realised that New Labour, in many ways, what the Tories are now. They are left-wing. People in Scotland typically vote leftist. They typically vote with socialist ideologies. So Labour no longer became a good option for the Scottish people. Another thing is, after the referendum, a lot of people were promised powers. A lot of people did vote no in Scotland. We did accept that. However, these powers were not necessarily delivered. People did want more power for local communities, and we did want what we were promised. So the SNP still upheld these values after this election. And so it was better. It was more appealing to young voters. It was more appealing to the elderly because there was less cuts. So it was something new. It was something fresh, and it was.
This is a debate, the third in a series of debates exploring the effects of the referendum. As you will know, of course, Scotland voted no in the referendum. Nicola Sturgeon hasn't ruled out another referendum. A marginal no, but it was still a no. Doesn't that not mean that the people have spoken and this should just be put to rest now?
Well, at the end of the day, democracy is democracy, and if the people want another referendum, then the people will get another referendum. I totally accept the result of the referendum, but it is something that the SNP aren't going to wipe from their manifesto anytime soon. It's one of the foundations that the party was built on, although that not every one of our members does agree with independence. In fact, not all of our members in the society agree with independence, and that's perfectly okay.
Is that a priority right now, independence?
Not a priority right now. If you look at my debates that the SNP and Nicola Sturgeon has been in the past year, moving on from that, we do not bring up the subject of independence. Very often other parties bring it up towards us. We are focusing on all the matters at hand and doing what we can do as part of the UK, which is why obviously we're very disappointed with the EVEL decision, because we want to we're in this union, we want to be able to make decisions as part of it, which is our right. And so we're focusing on priorities of what we can do.
One of the issues that Nicola Sturgeon's raised in the past is the issue of Brexit from the EU and how that might have. What other criteria would the SNP consider for a referendum?
Well, obviously it depends on who you ask, but the main criteria Human Rights Act, because that's something that the SNP upholds very strongly. I think it's something that the Scottish people in general uphold, and if we leave the EU, we're in danger of losing the Human Rights Act. And so that would certainly be criteria for another referendum, because the Scottish people, if they make their voices very clear, and it is clear that a majority of Scottish voters do want to remain in the EU, then we would have to stand up and look at the possibility of another referendum in that situation.
We have the Scottish Parliament coming up. To the best of your knowledge, of course, what do you think will be top priority on the manifesto for the SNP for this up-and-coming election?
Well, there'll be numerous things. One recent thing will be very important to students, and that was the decision to abolish grants within the UK. So obviously voters will have to appeal to students, because we're being repeatedly let down by many politicians, and so they're going to have to consider us. We are the future of this country, so they're going to have to take us into account and look after us after we graduate, because we're going to be economically active in the community. Nuclear weapons will still be a big thing on the table, as usual, because more and more parties are focusing towards removing Trident. But we still need to make sure that that is a top priority, because it's one of our top priorities as well.
Finally, quite a personal question, but you are a student. We are primarily appealing to students this evening. Why are you a member of the SNP?
I'm a member of the SNP because, as far as I'm concerned, the SNP is the only party that I can say cares about students. As a young person growing up in Scotland, I want to know that I can be educated without having to worry on my income. I want to know that my younger sister can go to university and not have to worry about that. The SNP helped abolish tuition fees for students in Scotland, which is a basic human right. And as well as that, I uphold the fact that all healthcare should be free, and there's far too much privatisation going on in places like England. You see far too much suffering. So, and as well as that, we also have the case of nuclear weapons. I was very involved in the CND back in Glasgow. I don't believe in nuclear weapons. I just feel as though any kind of warmongering is unacceptable. So they are the three main reasons why I'm a member of the SNP.
Excellent. Thank you very much for talking to us this evening. We'll let you go because it's 5 minutes to go. Enjoy the debate this evening. Thank you. So just to recap here this evening, Nicola Sturgeon, Kezia Dugdale, William Rennie, Patrick Harvey and Alex Johnson. The time is approaching 6:25, so we'll hand you over to the lecture theatre in a moment, chaired by the BBC's political editor for Scotland, Brian Taylor, awarded an honorary degree this year from the University of Dundee. So we're grateful to him for coming back. It's 2 hours. We'll be back on the air, all being well, at 8:30 with some audience reaction. The time now, they're approaching 6:25, and this is the Scottish Party Leaders Debates live from the University of Dundee.
And right down around the necks of all the feckless men that queue to be the next.
Online at DUSAmedia.com. From the heart of Dundee, this is DUSA Radio.
So that's on.
So no light, they can't hear me. Okay, right, good, because it will be so bad.
Do you want to just...
I know, that's not big enough. Alright, I'll speak about this sort of level. You're able to pick me up on the mic. This is Brian Taylor at Dundee University. That's getting. It's working.
Okay. So, just get that one.
I don't think it'll go in there, probably either.
Clip it on. So,
okay.
Put it back at the meat so you're not getting...
No, let's put it on.
One, two, 1, 2. One, two.
Welcome to Dundee, welcome to Dundee University, and welcome to the Scottish Leaders Debate 2016. A huge thank you to Brian Taylor for taking the time out to chair, and obviously to all the standing leaders and Alex Johnson for taking their time out their schedule to speak to students. Students in Scotland number in their thousands and can be argued as being one of the most active political force there is. From tuition fees to human rights, students have always had the chance to change an election or a referendum. During the independence referendum, this campus was awash of no fact stickers and yes. And even though Dundee was a yes city, it was a yes city on so much more than that. With one of the highest turnouts, it was a yes to engaging and a yes to getting involved in politics. My favourite actual moment during my whole time at Dundee was actually during the general election referendum where we posted the results night and I ordered about 20 Domino's pizzas for all the campaigners and people to come, and the campaigners for SNP and Labour came in after the count and absolutely demolished it. It really annoyed me because I was hoping no one would turn up because however, even though that night was a better night for some than others, it did show me that Dundee really is a vibrant city with so many levels, and that includes politics. Historically, Scotland has always had a passion and commitment for education. Not only that, but ensuring that the population has an opportunity to engage with education. This is why the 2016 Holyrood elections are of vital importance, because education is a reserved power to Scottish Parliament. There were many big questions about the future of education across the UK, and tonight, thanks to the panel members, we can start to create some clarity over what the leaders have in store. I will give you a bit of a warning at the end. I have a selfie stick. I'm breaking my #1 rule and using this, and I hope everyone will get involved in the selfie. I'll stop it right there, and I'll hand over to Brian Taylor to chair the rest of the event. Thank you very much.
Tim, thanks very much. Tim got me here on the promise of a Domino's pizza and a pint in Menny's. I mean, you know, what could I say? Genuinely, it's great to be back in the cradle of civilization. And now that my interest in football has waned entirely over the past few months, I'm able to focus entirely upon politics. Tremendous to see such a great turnout tonight for this debate. I know that Dundee University has hosted some major, amazing debates in this chamber and elsewhere, but it's still great, tremendous to see a turnout like this. Just take you very, very briefly through the format. They'll be very, very, very brief. They'll all be brief. Opening statements from the five parties, and then we've got some questions from members of the audience, which we might expand a little bit into more general debate, but I'm really looking for contributions from the audience as well. So have yourselves all ready and ready to go and ready to ask questions. I'm going to kick off first by inviting from the Green Party, Patrick Harvey, to give his opening statement. Would you join me in welcoming Patrick, please?
Thanks, Brian. And is this on? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a good start. Thanks for the invitation to come and speak to you, and thank you to everybody here for turning out. A really packed room, and it's encouraging to see that at the beginning of what's going to be a few months of exciting campaigning for all of us. I think we're going to be debating some critical questions that Scotland has to answer in not just the years ahead, but the next few decades. There could be fantastic opportunities for Scotland, and there are also extraordinary challenges and risks. And my concern about the next session of the Scottish Parliament is that we may yet again find that we're unable to grasp the opportunities of a new economy and see so many heads still stuck in the sand, hoping that we can just get back to business as usual the way the old economy worked. The age of fossil fuels has been a profound change in the way that our society and our economy is structured, but that age is passing. Not just people in the northeast whose jobs have been directly reliant on the over-dependence on fossil fuels, but so much of every aspect of our daily lives, right beyond the northeast throughout our whole society, still is over-reliant on that dangerous, polluting, and unsustainable form of economic activity. Now, as that fossil fuel age passes, there will be real opportunities. There are already jobs in decommissioning oil and gas infrastructure, which companies in Scotland are worried they're going to miss out on because other companies in other countries are bidding for that work against them. We need to embrace the opportunities that are transition away from fossil fuels and away from the top-down market-driven economy that's dominated by a tiny number of vast multinationals crowding out diversity in every sector. We need to embrace the opportunities that the change away from that model will open up. And if we don't, the risks won't disappear. If we don't embrace that change, we'll have to live with the risks, but we won't have grasped the opportunities. I think the Scottish Parliament is at its best when ministers of any political party know that the votes aren't in the bag already every time they get to their feet. I think the Scottish Parliament is at its best when ideas that are challenging are put to the floor of the chamber and in committees, and where ministers need to know that they need to convince other parties and work together with them in order to achieve progress. I think Scotland deserves a bolder government, and it needs a bolder parliament if that's going to be brought about. I think Scotland can grasp these opportunities if we take bold action and radical action and embrace the transition away from a failed economic model and a failed relationship with the environment around us. So those are the issues that we'll be taking to the electorate over the next few months, and I hope to have the chance to discuss them with you tonight.
Patrick, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Delighted now to welcome, will you join me in welcoming from the Liberal Democrats, Willie Rennie, please. Willie.
Thank you very much. The last time I was in this room, I was addressing a hustings full of architects. I'm expecting slightly different questions this evening, and perhaps, I suspect, it will be an even more vibrant discussion. Because I think this election is a big opportunity for us to set out our relative platforms. And for us, it's about setting out a bold, positive change for Scotland. Because I believe that first and foremost, we need change. We need to get fit for the future. And that means investing in our children, investing in education. I want to make the biggest investment in education since devolution. I want to invest in a pupil premium to give kids from disadvantaged backgrounds a chance to get up and get on, just like anybody else. It also means investing in nursery education, because that, as we know, is the best educational investment that we can make. But we also need to reverse the cuts that are coming from the government imposed on our education authorities. But we also need to get our health service fit for the future. That means treating mental health as on an equal par with physical health. Too often it's treated as a second-class citizen, and that needs to change. We also need to make sure that we're recruiting more GPs, because primary care is where the bulk of our health services are provided. But too often it's slanted elsewhere within the health service. And we need to improve social care, because social care is badly treated within the wider healthcare system. That needs to change. And the environment. The environment, too often we're missing our world-leading climate change targets, but we are missing those targets. That needs to change. We need to be investing in renewables, warm homes, public transport, but also ending open cast coal. That needs to come to an end. It's an old technology. It needs to move on. And civil liberties. Civil liberties that Liberal Democrats have stood up for in this last Parliament, whether it's on stop and search, whether it's on armed police, on, I would say, the shameful treatment of our once proud Scottish police force. That needs to change too. But we also finally need to move on from the referendum. I am a very proud unionist. I regard myself, in fact, as a federalist. I think it's important to be staying in the United Kingdom. But we've had that debate. There are two parties in this campaign that will love to talk about the referendum and keep it going. But for the sake of unity in this country, we need to bring the country back together again, heal those divisions, and deal with all the issues that I've just been talking about. That, I think, is the priority for this election. We can have the debate about independence another time, but let's heal those divisions now so that we can move on and solve those big problems to get Scotland fit for the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. The part of Ruth Davidson will tonight be ably played by Mr. Alex Johnson. Alec, please. Join me in welcoming him.
Thank you very much indeed. I find when I speak in Dundee, it's usually a good idea to start by explaining what a Conservative is. I've only got 3 minutes. You'll find that parties that aspire to government often tell you about all the things they're going to do. And the Conservative Party in this election will have a manifesto and it will tell you all the things we want to do. But government always seems to aspire to do more. And what the Conservatives have always believed is that government should actually do less. Government should be smaller. Government should have less influence over your lives. It should take less of your money. And it should concentrate on giving you the opportunities you need to succeed during your lifetime. Now, the problem we have in Scotland is that there's not enough Conservatives. If you want a government that will tell you how it will spend your money and leave you simply to pay up, then you have plenty of choice. And never let it be said that the Conservatives didn't offer choice. But the important thing is that we need to change the direction of government. We need to stop it from growing. We need to get better value for money for what we do in Scotland. And that means, in the words of one distinguished former First Minister, doing less better. And the Conservatives aspire to achieve that by ensuring that we do take less of your money when the tax powers allow us to do that, and ensure that it is attractive to stay and live, which is slightly different from the philosophical points of economics, is the union. The Conservative Party is, under its full title, the Conservative and Unionist Party. We are the preeminent unionist party in Scottish politics and will always aspire to be exactly that. But we don't do that simply because we want to be British. We don't do it simply because of tradition or history. We do it because it's good for Scotland right here and now. The pooling of resources over a population of 65 million people means that we have the safety net we need to survive as a small nation in an unpredictable world. Had Scotland become independent at the referendum last year, we would have been faced with the prospect of going forward to an Independence Day, only a few months away now, with our economic programme in tatters as a result of from its relationship with the United Kingdom, is that pooling of resources that has allowed us to avoid the catastrophe if one or two or three of our key industries begin to suffer at the same time. This is one of these perfect storms, and Scotland will enjoy the benefits of the United Kingdom. That's why the key message, as well as the economic one, will be that we are the party that stand for the union, we are the party that stand for the continuation of the union, we are the party of the United Kingdom, and we're not ashamed of that.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you. Now, our next speaker, many of you here at University in Dundee, our next speaker benefited partly from a Dundonian education. Delighted to welcome from the Scottish Labour Party, Kezia Dugdale. Kezia, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to ask for your vote, and I want to give you some reasons as to why I think you should vote Labour. I want you to vote Labour because you believe in the potential of people, because you believe in the potential of government to realise that potential in our people. I want you to vote Labour because you believe that movements of people working together can change the world, and that's the only thing that ever really has. I want you to vote Labour because our people are the best natural resource that we have, and giving them the skills and the education that they need to compete in an increasingly globalised world is the best thing we can do to prosper as a country. And I want you to vote Labour because you believe that there's and that we must break down every barrier to progress that stands in our way. I went to school just 5 minutes up the road. I went to Harris Academy. I got a great education in this city. I got good grades. I went on to university to study law. And many people leave Dundee and go on to do great things. But too many people in Dundee get left behind. We're in a situation in this city where 1 in 4 children still live in poverty. That's a disgrace. And we know that Tory austerity has left a whole generation of young people behind. But we also know that some of the decisions that Nicola's government have made have also left Dundee behind. There are 152,000 fewer people going to college in Scotland because of decisions that Nicola's government have made. Now that is hurting here in Dundee because you are 50% more likely to go to college in Dundee than you are based on the national average. So I look at this year's coming elections and I see a really exciting set of Scottish Parliament elections. For the first time we will have serious tax and welfare powers. We no longer have to accept austerity. We can choose a different path. But it will be a choice. That's why the Scottish Labour Party has set out 3 different tax choices that we would take from both the SNP and Labour, and the Tories, my apologies. One of those is a 50p tax rate for education. We would ask everyone who earns over £150,000 a year to pay a little bit more. And we would use the revenue from that tax to invest in education, to close that gap between the richest and poorest kids in this country. We would give £1,000 based on that revenue to head teachers for every pupil who is entitled to free school meals. In Dundee, that would bring an equivalent of £2.65 million of an additional money for education, on top of every single penny that the SNP already spend. £2.65 million to close the gap between the richest and the rest. And I think it's imperative that we do that. So I'm excited about this election that's coming up in May. I want to use the powers of our country to great effect to increase the potential of all of our people. And I ask you to vote Labour because we are the only party that first and foremost stands and exists to tackle poverty and inequality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kez. Our final speaker before we go to questions. We've got questions from the audience. I stress I want you to come in as much as possible. Final speaker, the leader of the SNP, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon.
Thanking the University for hosting tonight's debate. We will all no doubt debate each other many times between now and May the 5th. So well done, and thank you to Dundee for being hosts to this first debate of this election year. In a few weeks' time, I'm going to ask you and people across Scotland to re-elect me as First Minister and to re-elect the SNP to government, to elect the SNP for a third term in government. Now that's a big thing, and I take nothing for granted. I'm going to be working flat out over these next weeks and months to persuade you that the SNP is the best party to lead Scotland, and I'm the best person to be the First Minister of Scotland. I'm proud of what we've achieved as the government in Scotland. When I think back to 2007, when the SNP first took office, nobody then foresaw the severity of the financial crash and the recession that followed. But notwithstanding that, we have achievements as a country to be proud of. Today we've got an NHS that has a record budget, record numbers of people working in it, and is delivering some of the shortest waiting times anywhere in the UK. We've got more world-class universities proportionately than almost any other country in the world, and we've achieved that while keeping access to university free. There are no tuition fees in Scotland. We've got an economy that faces challenges, but we've got employment higher than anywhere else in the UK. We've got more people paid the living wage. We saw yesterday that for the first time, median earnings in Scotland are higher now than they are in England. And perhaps less tangibly, but just as importantly, I think we're a more confident country, a more engaged and empowered country than we were a few years ago. If you think back to before the referendum, I'm not sure we would have got a hall like this, as full as it is tonight, to come and talk about and listen to debate about politics. So I'm proud of our achievements, but I want to do much more and go much further. So what will my priorities be if you re-elect me to be First Minister? It will be to make sure that in the future we build on our success in education, that we have an education system that is great, not just for some, but for all. I want to see us double the provision of early years and nursery education, and I'm determined that we close that gap in attainment between those in our most deprived areas and those in our least deprived areas. I want us to make sure we equip the health service not just for today, but for the challenges it faces in the future. We need more treatment centres to deliver the greater numbers of knee and hip replacements and cataract operations that our ageing population will require. But we also need to invest more in social care and primary care and mental health to deal with the challenges of that. I want our future economy to be based on the skills, the innovation, the creativity of the people in our country. I'm determined that we use the new powers coming to our Parliament over tax and welfare, limited though they are, in a way that is fair and progressive and shows that there is an alternative to the approach the Conservatives are taking at Westminster to welfare and social security. But I don't want us to stop there. I want us, and I will keep arguing, that we should have even more power in our own hands. I will keep seeking to persuade you that Scotland should be an independent country, but I recognise that it's your decision, and I will always seek to persuade a majority of people across our country that we should be in control of our own destiny as a country. So I'm full of ambition for the future, and I'll work really hard over these next weeks and months to persuade you to put your trust again in me and in the SNP so that we can keep the country moving forward in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks to all our speakers. To questions, let's go straight to it. It's Edward Holmes in the audience, please. Edward, you've got a question, I believe, if you can give it to us. Is there a microphone able to go Edward's way? Is there a spare mic? No? Oh, yep, that's it. You don't have to pinch one of the speakers' mics, do you? That's great, thanks. Thank you.
This is a question for all of the representatives. I'm a University of Dundee graduated in 1994, and I've currently returned to complete a master's degree in managing in the energy industries. In my hometown of Dundee, there is a large-scale public spending which is fueling an ambition to bring thousands of jobs to the city. Admittedly, there's a £400 million shortfall in that £1 billion ambition. Dundee, amongst other Scottish student cities, struggles to keep talented graduates within Scotland. So what I want to know is what specifically will you do or are doing to improve the employment opportunity in Scotland, both short and long term, for Scotland's graduates of all disciplines, so that they can look forward to decent jobs, decent pay and prospects?
Edward, thank you very much for your question. Excellent question. I'm going to go straight to Kezia Dugdale on that question. Graduate employment, but there's a broad question in there about the economy as well and about development. Kezia, please. First.
Sure. As I said in my opening statement, I went to school here, but I left to go to university, and I return only to see my mum, who still lives here in the city. Why is that? Why do...
That's one vote then, eh?
You've heard about my dad, right?
I didn't bring it up.
I thought I would do that first, just to get it out.
Forgive me,
Yeah.
please.
If I could say, I think, listen, Dundee is utterly transformed from the place that it was when I went to school here, and that is amazing. And it's still in transformation. And I think the future about keeping graduate jobs here in Dundee is based around how Dundee feels about itself and how the rest of Scotland feels about Dundee. And I'm incredibly excited and positive about the future of this city. You know, life sciences, for example, technology, the computer games industry, rooted here with huge potential to expand even further. But in order for graduates to want to stay here after they graduate from university, I think we have to look at the standard of living. And in that sense, there's a lot going for Dundee as well. The music scene's fantastic, the nightlife is fantastic, the restaurant scene's growing. But what about things like housing standards, how easy it is for young people to buy their first home, what it's like to get to and from work, public transport infrastructure, what the opportunities are in the long term, ensuring that the schools that are available are the best they possibly can be. So I think everything we have to offer, using the power of government, can make Dundee fulfil its potential.
Okay, thanks for that. Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, I think what's happening in Dundee is down seeing progress at the waterfront development this morning, and that development with the V&A Museum at its heart, I think will transform the fortunes of this city. I mean, the construction of that development will support thousands of jobs, and it's got the potential to bring people to Dundee and to support high-value, high-quality jobs in the future. So
Graduate jobs, that's what everyone's asking about. Graduate, yeah.
What we need to do, and what we are doing, is support the industries of the future. Scotland's lucky. We've got key competitive strengths, not just in oil and gas and renewable energy, but in life sciences and creative industries, in particular now in tech as well. And we've got an economic strategy that's focused very much on the kind of things we need to do to create high value graduate jobs and keep our best talent here, focusing on innovation. We're going to innovate our way to economic success, in my view, making sure that we're an outward-looking economy, that we're looking to export more overseas to grow our economy in that way, and making sure that we're supporting high. So I think right now we've got everything to be really optimistic about, and I think this city is a shining example.
Thanks for that. Patrick Harvey, you questioned the drive for growth as an approach to the economy.
Well, let's start off on a note of consensus. Others have talked about the investment in the physical environment, and I certainly welcome that. I think the state has a really important role to direct investment, and I very much will welcome the day when I'm able to get into the station through the front door again. It's been a long-standing frustration. But, yeah, Nicola talked about some of the strengths, and there are strengths and huge opportunities in the Scottish economy. But Nicola mentioned the oil and gas industry as part of that. The oil and gas industry is not a strength, it is a vulnerability in our economy. And this is not an argument that is only heard from environmentalists these days. Just a couple of months ago, Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, was warning the City of London that this is a profoundly overvalued industry. It's valued according to its reserves, and the world has dramatically more reserves of fossil fuels than we can ever afford to burn. And that's before you look at the increased ambition that the Paris Agreement in December embodies. No fossil fuel producing country in the world, I believe, has yet got to grips with that reality, and the reality that most of that stuff is going to have to stay in the ground. We have still got the opportunity to shift our focus and to ensure that we're investing in the alternatives, the truly lasting and sustainable industries which will grow and will last with us for generations. I spent part of today with some folk working in the games and digital and creative industries, and part of their frustration is they know graduates are getting churned out and then leaving Dundee. We need to be investing in the new ways of working, not kidding ourselves on that one or two vast, big names are going to dominate that space, like another rock star or another, we need to be supporting the new, open, more collaborative ways of working that I think a lot of people working in that way want to embrace. And I don't see that coming from Scottish Enterprise at the moment. A shift of emphasis there would be very welcome.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Still another question about graduates and employment. Willie Rennie and then Alex Johnson. Willie, please. Pass the mic, yeah.
I think the combination of quality of life is important for graduates who want to know the experience of the place they're going to be living and working and bring up their families is really important. And that's why I think the Waterfront project is an important aspect of trying to keep the graduates here being educated. Another part of it is the new industries, the new technologies, the games industry, various other ones, renewable sectors, having the critical mass of jobs in this country that that if that particular job doesn't work out, you can get another one somewhere else. So you've got a chance of staying here rather than having to go off to the bright lights of London or somewhere else in England. So having that critical mass of activities is important too. The third thing, and this is where government is really important, I think we need to stop chasing the tax-dodging Amazons of the world and bring in screwdriver jobs effectively to Scotland. The plant outside Dunfermline, I think there's many jobs, I'm sure many people are enjoying those jobs. I can tell there are many more who would never ever work there. The quality, the experience is terrible, and we need to bring those kind of things to an end. Let's invest in the new technologies and new industries that are homegrown, rather than trying to attract tax dodgers from other countries.
Willie, are you saying Fife would be better off without the Amazon plant?
I think Fife would be to create long-term jobs,
Thanks.
rather than trying to chase after companies like Amazon, who just simply dodge the tax.
Alec Johnson, then I want some contributions on the economy, either from the platform or the audience. Alec Johnson, on that question about graduate employment and the opportunities.
Yeah, I think the premise set out in the question requires ambition to achieve, because Dundee as a city is very strong in terms of higher education and produces a very high number of graduates for the population of the city as a whole. So it's a big step to think about creating ways that we can ensure that these graduates all find jobs within the local economy. But it's not impossible, and the reason is a simple one, and that is that where you gather the best of people together, the opportunity there is to do research and come up with innovation, new ideas in the world of life sciences, but also in a number of other areas of technology. And what we need to do is underpin the economic advantages that these new technologies can bring, to find the investment, to channel it into areas like Dundee, so that the new techniques, the new discoveries that are made here are actually exploited here commercially, creating jobs for graduates, then creating jobs for those who aren't graduates but can work within these industries. That's how Scotland operated in the past. We came up with the new ideas, we made them work commercially, and we employed people as a result. In the past, graduates weren't the source of the new ideas. In the future, they will be, and that's why Dundee's graduates are so important to
Alex,
it.
thanks for that. Let's broaden the question a little bit. Nicholas Sturgeon, you talked about the nature of the economy in Scotland, but the growth is still sluggish, and there are the reports coming back from the various company organisations still talk about a problem with morale.
Well, confidence is, I think a bit of a scarce commodity, not just in Scotland but across the UK just now, and that's a big issue for us. But we've now seen 3 years of continuous economic growth in Scotland. That's the longest period of continuous growth in our economy since the Scottish Parliament was established. Our employment levels are higher than anywhere else in the UK. Our female employment level is higher. We're starting to see a growth in full-time, well-paid employment. For a while, much of the growth in employment was in part-time jobs. So there's lots to be positive about, but there are big challenges there.
Alec Johnson offered a tax-cutting agenda. Kezia Dugdale talked about a 50p top rate for those earning 150,000 or more when the new powers kick in. What's your thinking on income tax under the new powers?
I'm not going to tell you that tonight because we'll set that out before the election, but if you take business taxes, for example, the one business tax that we control as a country is business rates. We've got the most competitive business rates and regime in the whole of the UK. Our small business bonus meant that we targeted that support at the small business community, which is often the engine of the economy. To go back to what Willie said about investing in domestic businesses and trying to support them to grow. We do that extensively. Two of the most successful Scottish companies right now, Skyscanner and FanDuel, two shining examples of that growing tech hub in Edinburgh, were invested in their early stages by the Scottish Investment Bank, so run by Scottish enterprises. There are many more, Willie. I've given you two of the shining examples. But you know, there are many more. I'll leave Willie to argue that folk in Amazon should lose their jobs in Fife, but we'll concentrate on arguing for a balanced economy, where we're doing really well in Scotland just now.
Thanks for that.
Start-up companies, our big challenge now is to get them to scale up.
There's
lots and lots to be positive.
Willie, Ray, you were keen to come back in, and then I'm going to bring Kezia Dugdale in. Yeah.
Nicola presents herself as an anti-austerity party, but look at her record in comparison with George Osborne. She wants to match him on his income tax.
Legally required to.
She wants to undercut him on air passenger duty, and she's undercutting him on the council tax. This is not an anti-austerity party. They talk left, but act right. We need to match up their record with their rhetoric, because it does not match just now.
Hand the mic to... Willie, no hogging the mic. Hand it back to Nicola so she can answer you. Then Kezia Dugdale and Alex Johnson.
The Liberal Democrats, was that not the party that was in coalition with the Tories?
On this broader economy point, Kezia Dugdale and then Alex Johnson. Kez.
One thing I think you've seen come to the fore since three of the major parties in Scotland have been led by women is the women's agenda and the employment of women coming more to the fore. And I think that's a really interesting part of this debate, because the report that Nicola highlights also states that 1 in 5 Scots still earn less than the living wage, and that come 2021 it'll still be 1 in 6, and that so many women still need access to the labour market. Yet we shouldn't expect women just to go out to work to low-paid, insecure work. We need to give them the education and skills that they need to get secure jobs with prospects in a career, which is why I find the attacks to colleges so disappointing. It's why I want to focus on that and helping women have alternative routes into employment through part-time courses in colleges, which is so important so that everyone in the country can fulfil the potential and contribute to the economy.
Thank you for that. Alex Johnson, looking for contributions on the economy from the audience as well. Please, hands raised. Alex Johnson, then we'll go out there, then Patrick, yeah.
One of the reasons why breakthrough ideas developed in Dundee might not be spun out into commercial businesses here in Dundee is the tax regime. And that's why, as we go forward, we have to be absolutely sure that a business or an individual deciding to start out in Dundee isn't taxed more heavily here than they would be in the Thames Valley, for example, or in some of the cities in the United States. That's why, in this global world, we have to make sure our tax rates are competitive, because if we decide to tax the wealthy or to tax larger businesses disproportionately, then we have to accept that these businesses may choose to set up elsewhere.
Very briefly then out to the audience then,
I just
Patrick.
completely disagree with that. I mean, in order to grow businesses, you have to surround them with critical mass of other like-minded businesses, to have the best connectivity possible, to have a university community like we do in Dundee that thrives on innovation and skills and experience.
But you would accept that high taxation or higher taxation, unless it's contained, could be a potential deterrent to business.
Well, I actually think that sometimes having higher tax that leads to better services, that allows businesses to grow, creates a better environment for businesses to prosper. And actually the last thing we should be doing is competing for jobs on who pays the least tax and the lowest wages, which is what he wants to do.
Thank you for that. Gentlemen in the audience, please, and then back to Patrick Harvey.
Nicola Sturgeon said there that we have the third year of economic growth in Scotland in a row. True, a recent BBC article said that we are behind the UK by 0.3%. We're only 0.1%. Can you explain why we're behind the rest of the UK in economic growth in the last year?
Thank you for that. Hold that thought, Patrick. I promised you in, and then Nicola Sturgeon.
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess, I feel a kind of frustration here, because although I can find elements that I agree with several of the speakers on, for example, Kez is quite right to say that tax competition does not lead to success for a society, and that's what we should be caring about. There are plenty of businesses that operate in higher tax environments than the UK already, and they see that they get a benefit from that in terms of the skills and training of the workforce or other things that we have to invest in collectively. But a great deal of this is still about trying to prop up the model that just failed us. Somebody said a while ago, I forget who it was, that no one predicted the 2008 crash. Well, that's not quite true. There were many of us who said that an incredibly unequal economy, one in which debt blossoms and in which the value of financial transactions soars away out of all proportion to the value of actual goods and services in the real economy. A lot of us said that could never last. Of course it couldn't last, and it didn't last. Well, what we have now is the opportunity to build something that's lasting, and that has to mean breaking the reliance on old ways of thinking and old ways of working within an economy.
Patrick, thank you. Nicola Sturgeon, you were asked there about the relative development rate.
Direct answer to your question is that is likely at the moment to be not exclusively but substantially down to the impact of the oil price, particularly on the North East economy. But within those figures, there are also real signs that tell us where we need to invest, because there are parts of our economy that have been and are still doing better than the counterpart parts of the economy across the UK. Construction, for example, has seen substantial growth in Scotland, slowed down a little bit in the last quarter, but still doing very well relative to other parts of the UK. And that is partly because we've taken decisions to invest heavily in big infrastructure projects like the Queensferry Crossing, some of the work that we're seeing here in this city. And so within those figures, there's very clear lessons for us about how we invest to make sure we support ongoing growth.
But there's a tacit acknowledgement in there that actually, once you start looking beyond the headline figures, GDP itself doesn't really tell you anything meaningful. It doesn't tell you who's benefiting from economic activity or who's bearing the social and environmental burden of generating.
Thanks. Nicola, how do you answer the accusation from Willie Rennie that you're simply aping George Osborne on tax and spend?
Right now, as First Minister, I lead a government that every single year, right now, is investing £100 million, more than £100 million, to mitigate the impact of George Osborne's policy. It's because of the money my government. It's because of the money my. Well, you can sit here and interrupt me all night, but it's not very polite for a gentleman like you. It's because of the money we're investing that nobody in Scotland, unlike folk in England or Wales even, nobody in Scotland has to pay the bedroom tax. We're investing, as I said, in small businesses and trying to make sure
that we
keep education.
But First Minister,
paying in grand tuition fees in England, you don't have to do that in Scotland.
But First Minister, we're still not. In the absence of your tax thinking, and I understand why you say you wish to defer that until the announcement prior to the election, but is Willie Rennie not right in saying you were previously offering a 3% cut in corporation tax, you're now offering a cut in APD? Nobody is hearing what might be called progressive policies that perhaps are coming from the others.
Outline the decisions we are taking to take away the impact of some of George Osborne's policies in the most vulnerable in our society. Our investments already and the additional investment we have planned in early years education, giving young people the best start in life. APD is one of these policies that's about trying to generate more growth in our economy, to make our economy more internationalist and outward looking. So we'll continue to take the decisions we think are right to get our economy growing, but to make our society fairer.
Thank you.
And just before,
briefly then, right up the back of the hall.
Before we move on, this separate argument that starts up occasionally about whether growth is a good thing or not, always remember that if we had a few years of negative growth, we would know about it, and it wouldn't be long before somebody didn't eat.
Thanks for that.
Nothing in nature grows forever.
Right at the back of the hall, please. Yep, please. On you go.
Is it working?
Go for it, yeah, it's going. Go.
So I just wanted to, Nicola, you're saying that you've outlined how you're going to mitigate the effects of George Osborne's economic policy. But how, you were goading Willie, saying about how he wants the people in Fife to lose their jobs at Amazon. Are you going to come to Dundee and look the 750 workers? The 750 local authority workers who are going to lose their jobs when the £23 million of cuts from Holyrood affect the local authority. How can you justify cutting corporation tax, air passenger duty and freezing the council tax when those things are happening?
Thank you very much. Nicola Sturgeon.
Corporation tax, because I don't have the power over corporation tax. I wish I did have more tax powers over a wider range of things. Look, the Scottish Government's budget has been cut in real terms every year since the Tories came to power. We tried to deal with the impact of that as fairly as possible. I know times are tight for local authorities and for other organisations in the public sector. The reduction in local authority budgets next year is 2% of their total revenue expenditure, and that's before we take account of the additional £250 million that we're proposing to invest in social care to help local authorities, in partnership with the health service, provide better social care services. So these are the decisions in a tough climate that we are taking to try to protect what matters most in our public services as much as we possibly can. We're investing next year an additional £500 million in our National Health Service to make sure it can continue to deliver for the people who rely on it. And all of these parties, if they want to make different decisions, we're still in a budget process. So let them come forward with their proposals, but let them not just come forward with proposals about how we spend more money. Let them come forward with proposals about how we fund that extra spending.
Thanks to the First Minister. Kezia Doug, you've faced that accusation before, that Labour puts forward individual plans without drawing into a coherent alternative budget.
Absolutely, and we will put forward our own plans during the budget process. I give the First Minister that assurance tonight. Likewise, I'm not going to explain them if the First Minister is not going to set out her progressive tax agenda. I think that's fair play. Can I just make one comment about local authority cuts? Nicola Sturgeon's right to say that she's putting in an additional £250 million, but the total amount of local authority cuts is £500 million. So give with 250, take 500 away with the other. But the actual point I wanted to make, Brian, was about air passenger duty, because this is one tax cut that Labour wouldn't make. We would use that money differently. And why that's important is that the only evidence that exists to say the air passenger duty cut would be good for the economy was produced by Edinburgh Airport. I wonder why that was. Now, we have evidence to show that every £1,000 used to cut air passenger duty supports about 9 jobs. That's the Edinburgh Airport figure. Spend £1,000 to maximise the income of low-income families, and you can secure and support 15 jobs. That's why everything we can do to help people who are poor or face inequality every day is actually sound economic policy.
How about if the overall tax cut revitalises the economy more generally and provides employment for those who are currently in low wages?
Well, we had a discussion earlier, but I don't think that having a low tax agenda is the way to create a sustainable, prosperous economy.
Willie Ruddy, very briefly, then we're going to move on to the second question because we're out of time.
Nicola for being in government with the Tories for 5 years. We went into that government to hold the Conservatives back from doing their work. I can tell you, I never ever thought a nationalist government would be determined to outdo the Conservatives, even though they're not in administration with them. But that's exactly what Nicola's doing. She's in favour of lower tax than George Osborne, despite her rhetoric. She needs to match.
Willie, did you not warn your party against going into coalition with them?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Was that Tavish? Maybe that was Tavish.
No, that was Tavish. No, I actually. I was proud of the fact that we cut tax for those on low and middle incomes.
Okay.
The workers, the poorest in society, benefited from the Liberal Democrats being in government. That would never have happened to the Tories.
I'm not entirely sure if that's the case.
Hang on,
On the pension.
Right, before we'll...
By the Liberal Democrats, not by the Conservatives.
Right, to borrow a phrase, to borrow a word from the presiding officer, wished! Can we move on to a second question? Leah Farnan in the audience, please. We're up, yep, there we are. Yes, on you go. Thank you.
In Dundee at the university, we've got a growing population of international students. So with the EU referendum coming up, what was your party's views and what would your party do if we were to exit to continue that international students can study at ease in Scotland?
Okay, a very precise question there, but we can broaden a little if we like into Brexit more generally. Alec Johnson, first of all, on this one. The students and those from other parts of Europe, would they be deterred if there is British exit from the European Union? Perhaps you would welcome British exit from the European Union, I'm not sure.
I'm not going to go that far.
It's a night for dodging questions.
I think the situation, if you look at international students at the moment from beyond the EU, we benefit greatly from these students. We have problems relating to post-study work visas that have to be addressed, but nevertheless we do benefit from that. I believe if it were the case that Britain ended up outside the European Union, that our education establishments, our education institutions like Dundee University would be key parts of our economy, and that bringing students in to be educated would be a very important part of what we did. In this country, we have a long record of providing education internationally, and I think that could be improved and continued. Looking at the whole issue around the United Kingdom's involvement in Europe, which I think is a very significant one, we are at a key point at the moment where the Prime Minister David Cameron is negotiating or attempting to renegotiate Britain's position within Europe. I think that's vital. I think Europe, the European Union, is a failing institution. Its pursuit of economic and political convergence has done it no favours. It's done it much more harm. And that unless we can change that direction, then Britain's future may lie elsewhere.
So you need something pretty big from those negotiations that are due to conclude at the European Council in February, or you're going to say, let's get out of it.
I want something that will indicate a clear change of direction for the EU, and one that will deliver a European Union that is for the benefit of its citizens, not for a handful of people who want to steer some pan-European project for their own ends.
Thank you very much. Kezia Dugdale, reverting to the question on, I did say broaden it, and I'm grateful you did, Alex Johnson, but the question as well on students from all cultures and nationalities.
Alex Johnson has an utter cheek to say that we have a problem with the post-study work visa. The problem is that your government cut it. You are quite happy to take international students' money when they come to study here, and then you ask them to leave. What we should do is ask international students to invest their whole future in this country, and that's what we did when we had Fresh Talent in place, which was a Labour initiative. You should be utterly ashamed of yourself for that remark. Can I make...
He doesn't...
I make a slightly wider point. I mean, I go around the country and speak to university principals all the time. There's one of them in the room tonight, and when I ask them what the big challenges universities face, the first and foremost thing they say every single time is the visa system. It's the immigration system. So that is going to be an issue regardless of our situation in Europe. But can I say, if the European Union referendum is in June, and it looks increasingly like it might well be, we have to stop worrying and arguing and debating in the press every day what will happen if we vote to leave, and start making the case for why we should stay. And I think membership of the European Union is a fundamentally good thing for Scotland.
Why?
It supports jobs, it supports trade, the social charter. The social charter across Europe, the idea that we collectively work around standards at work means that we can bring jobs to our shore without competing on low wages and low skills. We can demand a global high skills agenda by working with other European countries. So I am proud to make the case for why we should stay in the European Union, and I look forward to getting on with it.
Thank you very much, Patrick Harvey.
On the issue of post-study work visa, first of all, I was a member of the cross-party Smith Commission, which after the referendum sat down to try and figure out what other form of devolution should happen, and one of its recommendations was that the UK government should be willing to explore the alternatives, a replacement for the post-study work visa. I was pretty cynical about the whole Smith process, and I'm sorry to say that my cynicism has been entirely justified by the complete betrayal by the UK government on even holding out the opportunity to negotiate on alternatives that could be put in place. So I would like to think that any political party that did take part in the Smith process, and that's all of us here, will go into the Holyrood election saying that we're not going to accept that position from the UK government, and that a replacement for the post-study work visa is back on the agenda, whether they like it or not. On the issue of the European Union, I have to say that whichever decision Alex Johnson makes at the end of the day about whether he's voting in or out, I'm not on the same side of the debate as him. Because this is not, just like the independence referendum, this is not just a binary choice. Independence wasn't just about yes or no, it was about what kind of country we want to be. This referendum is not just going to be about in or out, it's about what kind of Europe we want. I think it's vital that we win the argument for staying in Europe, but not on the basis of some offer of an even more free market mania than we've seen in the past. This can't be allowed to become a debate between David Cameron's version of a free market Europe and Nigel Farage's version of a free market deal with Europe. Europe is at its best. Europe is at its best when it is a social Europe and an environmental Europe, and it's achieved some great stuff on both of those. That's the Europe we should be arguing for.
Thanks, Patrick. Nicola Sturgeon, and do you, first of all, do you expect the referendum is likely to be in June?
It's starting to look that way. I think it's a bad move for it to be in June. I think it's slightly disrespectful to the fact there'll be elections happening in Scotland and Wales and London in the weeks before that. But also, I think it's time we got on to the big arguments in principle about why, in my view, we should stay within the European Union. I think David Cameron is narrowing the debate down too much to these very narrow areas of renegotiation that most people don't even understand and don't think are particularly meaningful. Let's get on to the big arguments about why the single market does bring benefits, why free movement of people across Europe is a thoroughly good thing. It is good for us and it's good for other member states. And yes, I agree with Patrick, let's make a real defence of the strong social benefits and social protections that come from European Union membership. I don't want David Cameron to have unfettered control over workers' rights and these social protections. I like the protection that comes with being members of the European Union. So I'll be making a strong, positive case for us to stay in. Europe's not perfect, of course it's not. There's many things I would like to see change about it. I think it should keep its nose out of some issues that are rightly the decision of domestic governments. But I think it's right that we're in there, and that's the case I'll make. And what I think will be outrageous, although I hope it doesn't happen, is if Scotland finds itself being taken out against our will.
Would that
would be democratically indefensible?
Would that, as you've suggested in the past, act as a trigger for a further referendum or independence?
I think you would see people, if we saw a poll yesterday that suggested that even if Scotland voted 60+% to stay in,
65,
if
35,
England
yeah.
voted just 51% to come out, then Scotland would be outvoted. I just think that would be unacceptable. And I do think many people would say it would be time in those circumstances to look again at independence.
Never mind many people. Would you be one of those many people?
Be, yes.
Very much indeed.
Michael, this is not some proxy debate for independence. This is far, far bigger. We need to be talking about the real benefits. I actually think the European Union, next to the NHS, is one of the greatest institutions and creations of our time.
Not a failing institution like Alec Johnson has
No,
said.
I don't think it's failing at all. Of course, it's got faults. But if you looked to previous generations, they would look upon us with great envy. The fact that we are able to cooperate on trade, on social standards, on environmental standards, right across the European Union. That we're not engaged in constant conflict across the European Union. Because that was the experience of Europe for the previous centuries. Now, I think we should really recognise the big benefits that we have of that cooperation. And that's why I'll be making a very positive case on its own merits for staying in Europe.
And on the forgive me, I diverted you to other topics, but on the question about students from elsewhere being enabled to study in Scotland in the event of exit.
The kind of free movement of people, but also the
I see, that's one of the strong
education
aspects.
is
Yeah.
critically important. I actually hope that we see some progress in the UK government on the post-study work visa. The fact that we're all united, officially the political parties, maybe not Alex Johnson, the political parties are united on this issue, I think should carry some weight and make a difference.
Thanks.
But the big issue here is about making a big positive case for the European Union.
Thank you for that.
I think we too often take it for granted.
Well, thank you for that. Alec Johnson, you had one brief point you wanted to make.
It's my job, I suppose, to argue against the Europhiles, however positive they are. I don't find the EU that is currently holding the people of Greece as some kind of economic hostages a particularly attractive organisation. And that's the reason why I want a deal and I want a vote on it. And that vote has to be quick, because Europe is in such turmoil at the moment, it's in a state of flux. If a deal was done at the European summit later this month, then we have to vote on that quickly. There's no point in doing a deal and then voting for it a year down the line, because Europe could be a very different place. In fact, many of the governments may not even be there anymore. That's why we need a quick referendum once the deal's on the table.
Thanks, well then all forgive me, I'm going to have to move on to the third question. Thara Pakyaharaja in... Where are you? Oh yeah, thank you. Great, thanks very much. Yes, please, your question.
Care for mental health has been overlooked and underfunded. Realistically, how is your party going to progress towards a solution for this issue?
Okay, the care of mental health. Willie Rennie, you mentioned that in your opening remarks. Maybe to go to you first on this.
Do you know there are no beds for children and adolescents north of the Tay in Scotland for mental health? There are no beds. There was a young mother came to me and said that her daughter was self-harming, and it took a year from seeing the GP to get to a consultant. Now, I can imagine what that feels like for somebody at that age. It must have felt like a lifetime. And that's what we need to change. We need to invest in mental health services on a par with physical ill services, because too often we do the opposite. So we need to make big changes. Now, there have been extra consequentials come from the budget consequentials come from the UK government. Some of that's been invested in mental health services in Scotland, but we need to go so much further to invest in adult services, but also child and adolescent mental health services, because I think they're treated as second-class citizens, and that needs to change.
Right, so that will, Nicola Sturgeon, you've faced this question from Mr. Runny and from others in the Chamber, indeed I think almost the week before last. Anyway, your contributions.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with much of what Willie Rennie said there. Traditionally, in the health service, not just in Scotland but across the world, mental health services have been treated, they used to be called the Cinderella service. Now, in Scotland, unlike in England, we've never had a legal distinction between mental health services and physical health services, but I think everybody would accept that when it comes to attention and priority and investment, there has been a long-standing distinction. And what we're seeing now is a rise in demand for mental health services. Now, some of that actually we should see as positive, because people are much more aware of mental health problems and what services could be available to help. The stigma associated with mental health is now much reduced from what it used to be, so people feel more able to come forward for help, and that's a good thing. But we've got to make sure that we're investing in the services to make sure when somebody does come forward for help, they're getting that help, because there can be nothing worse than if somebody is plucking up the courage to come forward to find that that help is not there. We have plans to invest over the next few years an additional £150 million in improving mental health services for all ages, but including child and adolescent mental health services. I was outlining some plans last week for how just over 50 million of that is going to be spent to increase access to psychological therapies, so that we can vastly increase the number of people who can access those therapies. So this is a big focus. The health service has always faced challenges. The challenges it faces in the next few years are about more of us living older, for longer, and from mental health, more people coming forward, and these are the challenges we've got to address if our health service is going to be fit for the future. So we're absolutely determined that we do that.
Nicola, I'm going to bring in the other members of the panel in a second, but can I go back to the questioner? What prompted you to raise this? I know it's a big issue. What's your concern on this topic?
Well, I think it's mental health is kind of taking a back burner when it comes to the health service. So I feel like more funding should be provided when it comes to mental health, and especially with children and adolescents. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Patrick Harvey, let's bring you in, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to find very strong cross-party agreement on some of the questions of principle, that there's a profoundly positive change to welcome in the fact that mental health is higher up the agenda now, as well as the reduction, not elimination, but reduction in social stigma, as Nicola mentioned, the fact that this is something people feel more able to talk about and more willing to recognise. We need to make sure that employers are in that position as well, of recognising the impact that mental health has on people, but also the impact that working conditions have on people's mental health. And if we're, as a society, more able to take responsibility and discuss these issues, that's profoundly positive. It does mean investing in those services, and investing in services doesn't happen unless we're willing to raise the revenue to do so. So whether we're talking about mental health or any other public service, the next Scottish Parliament is going to have to be willing to raise the revenue to invest in those services.
To increase taxation, either at the national or the local level?
Well, at both, in my view. But the last thing I want to say on this is that if we're going to see mental health in the same context and as the same importance as the rest of the health agenda, that also has to be about prevention. It also has to be about health promotion and a public health agenda in society. And whether we're talking about the impact of welfare cuts on some of the most vulnerable people in society, or just the in my view, very shallow, negative, kind of personally hostile agenda of a culture and a society that's geared around greed principally and an obsession with consumption, these things are not good for people's mental health. They're not a healthy way for people to relate to one another, and they undermine the things which genuinely support mental health, like good relationships and good, strong communities. So we need to take that public health agenda to it, not just thinking about treatment.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Kezia Dugdale and then Alex Johnson. Kezia, please.
Mental health is, of course, a huge issue in a university community like we meet tonight. And I'm minded of that because when I was at university, my flatmate had a breakdown, and I watched her over several months be consumed by depression and really have nowhere to turn until it got very, very serious. And my first job was as a welfare advisor at Edinburgh University Students' Association, where I used to see students every single day who clearly needed help. And I would refer them to university counselling services that had weeks and weeks of waiting lists just to be seen by somebody. So there is a huge issue in a university campus. What underlines poor mental health? Well, we know it's complicated, but two things just to really pick up on what Patrick said. One is debt is very often, certainly when it comes to presentations at GP practices, stress and anxiety manifest themselves in a GP practice largely are about people's personal finance situation and the lack of help that they have in their lives. And can I also mention to you a big thing we could do around mental health is make the case for a living wage. Now you might think that's mad, but the formula for the living wage is built not just to make sure you have enough food to feed yourself or to heat your house, but to have enough disposable income to live a little. You know, to have a bit of recreation in your life, to go to the cinema, to have some exercise, just to live, and that makes a more positive impact on your mental health. So we shouldn't just see mental health as a health issue, in my view. Mm-hmm. It's a much wider societal issue, and that's how we overcome it.
Thank you for that, Kezia. Alex Johnson there. I'm going to broaden it a little into the health service more generally. Alec, yeah.
As others on the panel will know, my colleague Mary Scanlon, MSP, has built a lot of her political career on campaigning for equal treatment for those with mental health difficulties within the health service. But during my lifetime, which admittedly is a lot longer than the lifetime of many in here, the way we treat people who require mental health treatment has changed dramatically, and in many ways it's changed to the positive. But unfortunately there are two issues that I think are a problem. First is the resource that is targeted at those who are currently being cared for in the community. But more importantly, attitudes are not changing as quickly as they need to be. And the reason why I say that is that I can think of 2 or maybe 3 cases in my caseload at the moment who are in reality people with mental health difficulties who are not getting the support that they should through their GPs. And until we can get GPs in every circumstance to recognise mental health issues and to deal with them accordingly, we continue to have a difficulty, and it is about the perception of those who are professional.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Excellent contributions on that. We've got a few minutes left. I'm going to broaden this very slightly into the health service more generally. Bring in Nicola Sturgeon first of all on this. Your government says that you continue to protect the health budget, but aren't the demands always going to outpace the supply of cash to meet those demands?
That's the danger of the health service, and it's been the danger of the health service since the day it was established, which is why I think it's really important to invest in the NHS, and we're doing that. But if we don't reform and change the way the health service delivers healthcare, it doesn't matter probably how much money we invest in it, demand will outstrip what it's able to cope with. That's why what we're doing just now by integrating health and social care and investing more money in social care is so important, because if older people can stay at home supported properly as they get older, then they're less likely to end up in hospital when they don't need to be in hospital, and frankly it's devastating to their independence and their sense of health and well-being if they do end up in hospital. Investing in primary care so that more people can be treated in the community, again without going into hospital. And what I spoke about earlier on, making sure that the way we organise our hospitals is fit for purpose as well. The ageing population means that there are going to be thousands, hundreds of thousands more very basic operations needing to be done in years ahead, and I'm talking knee replacements and hip replacements and cataract operations. That's why we're proposing 5 new specialist elective hospitals spread across the country to do what the Golden Jubilee in Clydebank does right now, purely elective treatment, so that people are not getting their planned operation interrupted because there's been a spike in emergency demand. So these are the things we need to do to reshape the health service so that it is fit for the challenges that are down to the line.
Is that not what was going on at Stracathro before you closed it down?
We took it back in, we simply took it out of the private sector and put it back into the National Health Service. We didn't close it down. Stracathro is still open today.
First Minister, a tiny one. Before I bring in Kezia Dougall, you'll have seen the comments by the Chief Nursing Officer about rudeness on the wards. What do you make of that?
I actually think the Chief Nursing Officer was making a reasonable point. Our nurses do a fantastic job. My sister works in the health service. She's not a nurse. I've had, as most of us do, many family members who've worked in the health service. I have nothing but admiration for everybody who works in our health service, and often nurses are at the front line of that. What the Chief Nursing Officer was simply saying is that nurses, like all of us who interact with the public, perhaps this is particularly important in the health service, have to remember that, if we're not feeling great one day and maybe snap at somebody, then that can have a huge impact on somebody who's having health care. So I think she was making an important point, but it was not intended in any way to undermine our
chastise nurses. Kezia Dougall, your diagnosis of the health service?
Boom, boom.
I'm here all week. No, actually I'm not, but go.
The National Health Service is one of the Labour Party's proudest achievements, and I take questions about its future in that regard very seriously. We have to recognise, though, that it was designed to fight disease. That was its purpose. And now the biggest thing it faces is not so much disease, but old age. So we have to reform it and make sure that it's fit for the future. And children born in Scotland today, 1 in 4 of them will live to the age of 100. So we simply can't carry on in the way that we're going.
So you agree with the integration of health and social care?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm very intrigued to see the detail of the First Minister's policy, this £250 million that's going in to move towards a system where we address delayed discharge. It's not clear to me yet how much of that money is going to local councils, how much of it's staying with the NHS. We need it to go into local authorities so we can provide the social care that so many people need. But can I give you one quick statistic?
Very briefly, almost out of time.
I heard a fascinating presentation from a senior NHS worker recently who told me that 50% of the money we spend in our NHS goes to support 2% of the patients, people who need very serious interventions in their lives. And I think if we did a lot more around the preventative health agenda for that particular client group of people, we could save a lot of money and build an NHS fit for the future.
Thank you for that. I'm going to bring in Patrick Harvey and then Willie Reddy, very briefly if you would, guys, because we're almost out of time.
Yeah, obviously the value of the National Health Service is, Kez is right, an extremely proud achievement, and I think, every one of us should value it compared with the situation that exists in some other countries where people can, by no fault of their own, be landed with bills that simply destroy any chance of a decent quality of life, even if they can afford the treatment that they need at all. I think, though, it's not simply a question of saying that old age is the biggest problem that the NHS faces. If we fail to invest in a health-promoting society, in a society which supports and encourages people to have good health, and only focus on treatment, on spending our money on treating ill health, then I think we will spend a huge, disproportionate amount of money on keeping people elderly and ill for longer, rather than elderly and fit and well for longer. So the huge opportunity has to be about seeing an increasing lifespan as a chance to have an increasing length of fitness and wellness and health and contribution to society.
Will it run very, very briefly, if you would, please?
I suspect the rudeness on the wards, if it exists to any great extent, is in large part down to the enormous pressure that nurses and doctors are under. And it is enormous. My sister herself, she's a nurse. She tells me almost daily of the enormous pressure that they face, and therefore the quality of treatment that they are unable to provide because of the lack of resources. I think we need to look seriously at whether we're matching the real demand in the NHS with the resources. That's what needs to change. Secondly, we need to make sure that GPs are properly recruited. We have a massive shortage in primary care. The proportion of resources that are invested in primary care has reduced over the years since this administration has been in charge. Yet the bulk of the work in the NHS is done in primary care. We need to reverse that to make sure we've got proper investment where it really, really counts. That's the kind of change I think we need to make.
Thank you very much.
NHS that we all value.
Thank you very much indeed. From me, a big vote of thanks to Dundee University, the Dundee University Students Association. Just say this is the liveliest political debate that has been in Dundee since 1922, when Winston Churchill faced Neddy Scrimgeour. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Once again, a huge thank you to all the panel members here for giving up their vital time. Obviously, it's an important time coming up for them. A huge thank you to Brian for chairing the event. If he didn't do it, I would have. Trust me, it would have been awful. And I think my second, and probably my biggest thanks goes to Dominic Young, the Vice President of Communications and Campaigns, and Stuart Squire, who is our Democratic Support and Policy Coordinator. They've been the two of our major leads, and without their organisation, trust me, it would have been a far less slick event. So I just want everyone to put their hands together for them. We've had over 30 student volunteers tonight. This is a student association event. It's attended mostly by students. Sorry, Dad, not a student anymore. And therefore it's been run by students. So there have been over 30 from coordinating into the building to our fantastic media service who have been live streaming, blogging, recording, doing all sorts. Hopefully they make it look good. So a massive huge thanks to them. So again, I hope to be a lot of Thank you to the university, especially external relations and the events department. I got an email from the events manager with all this massive list of things that I should be doing. I never thought that a glass of water would be so arduous at times. Really did, but you almost got it. So a huge thank you to the university and external relations now. My final thank you is actually to everyone in this room. You, the students and anyone else in the general public who was lucky enough to get this in. It's been Holyrood is very much an important election for every single student in this room, and therefore I can't encourage you enough to get involved. Politics is about people having the right of control. Without politics, I wouldn't be standing here, and the majority of the panel wouldn't be standing here. However, I don't think the majority of the panel members got to where they are through handing out free cream eggs, free hugs, which didn't go down well, and my opponent at the time had free dog that people could stroke. However, if they do want some tips, I'm happy. I work with a dog. This election period is all about engagement. It's all about holding the representatives in front of you to account. Make the change that you want to see happen. So I'm really glad to see everyone in this room and beyond engaging. Within the university, we have plenty of political societies, and they're out downstairs showcasing themselves for you.
Right.
And further afield, we live in a city that is at a turning point. As it was talked about, the redevelopment of the waterfront is a huge opportunity for Dundee, but it only works when you actually have a say on how it turns out. But any first years that are here, it's going to affect you the most. I'm leaving, so it doesn't bother me. Oh wait. So I would just like to end and urge everyone in this room to get involved and get engaged and vote in the next elections. Thank you very much. And unfortunately it's going to happen. I really don't want to do it, but I've been told I have to get a selfie of everyone. So if the leaders would like to... people want to do 7, 8, and people tend to take... My battery's very low, so... Anybody wants to smile, get up behind me. face in there? And it's not taking a photo, of course. Come on, yeah. There we go. Thank you very much, everyone. If you'd like to make your way down to the main reception foyer, we've got free wine, yay! And obviously, hopefully, leaders will stay around and continue the debate onwards. Thank you.
Did it not work?